going to the book of Zmanim. This is a new book. It's called Zmanim. And as the Rambam does at the beginning of every book, he begins with a verse from the Torah, from Tehillim here. B'Shem Hashem Kel Olam, in the name of God, God of the world. That's from Bereshis. Nachalti eidosecha li'elam kisosin libi hema. I inherited your testimonies forever, for they are a joy of my heart. So these are the testimonies. Zmani means time. This is the time period. Things that are related to time, like the laws of Shabbos. And that's the first thing that we're going to deal with. We'll deal with things related to Shabbos, like Eruvin and the like. And these, even though Shabbos comes only once a week, but they are testimonies forever because they affect our lives forever. So this is the third book, the book of Zmanim, times. Hilchos Aser Siduram. There are 10 sets of halachas over here. There's Hilchos Shabbos, the laws of Shabbos. There's the laws of Eruvin, the laws of Shivas Aser. So Shvisas Aser, the 10th day, referring to Yom Kippur, the laws of Shvisas Yom Tov, of resting on holiday, like Pesach, the Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah, the laws of not eating chametz and eating matzah on Pesach, the laws of Shofar and Sukkos and Lulav, the law of Shkolim, the half shekel that we give, laws Kiddush HaChodesh, the laws of the sanctifying the new month, the laws of Tainus, of fasting, and the laws of Megillah and Hanukkah. So this is where what we're going to be doing for the next little while. Hilchos Shabbos Hagdama, we begin with the laws of Shabbos. There are Yesh B'Chol Chamesh mitzvahs, shtei mitzvahs hesed. There are 5 mitzvahs in the laws of Shabbos. 2 positive commandments, the shleisha mitzvahs lo yisaseh, and 3 negative commandments. These are the detail. The first is lishbais b'shvi, positive commandment to rest on the 7th. The second is shaloi lases b'melacha, is a prohibition not to do any kind of work. Third is shaloi lanish Shabbos, so you shouldn't administer any kind of punishment on Shabbos. The fourth halacha, shaloi l'teisla chutz l'gvul b'Shabbos, so you shouldn't go out of the established limits of the territory on what you're allowed to go, limits of Shabbos. And the fifth is the Kaddish Yom Shabbos b'Zechira. The fifth is to remember the day of Shabbos in remembering. And we're going to explain this in all of these chapters. Chapter 1. Whew. Okay. So, the resting on Shabbos is a positive commandment. Where do we know this from? It says in the verse, on the 7th day you shall rest. That's in the book of Exodus. Anybody who does any kind of work on that day, you are nullifying, you're negating a positive commandment. And also you are transgressing a prohibition. So 2 things, there's a problem. As the verse says, you shouldn't do any kind of work. Now, what is constitute work? This, of course, we're going to go through all of these chapters. We'll deal with it throughout our journey together. Now, what does it mean that you're obliged on doing work? What is the transgression engaged? So there's different categories. If you did it willingly, purposefully, chayiv koros, then you are cut off at an early age from the hands of heaven. And if there were witnesses when you did it willfully, purposefully, and they are witnesses and they warned you, and we'll get into those details, of course, we're just giving the general principles right now. Niskal, then a person gets stoned. The im also bishkagu, what if you did it inadvertently, in other words, by mistake? You are obliged to bring a sin offering of a fixed nature. All of that will come in time. Now, halacha base. Second halacha, which we're going to now define some terminologies. the language that we're going to use henceforth. Anytime that we say in the laws of Shabbos that this particular thing that you are chayiv, meaning that you are liable, right? You are liable. What that means is that you're liable for chorus to be cut off by spiritual death. I mean, from the hands of heaven, a death, an early death. And of course, if there were witnesses and properly warned, then you're obliged to be killed through stoning. And if it was inadvertent, you were not aware in the mistake that you made, then you are liable a sin offering. Halacha Gimel 3. And continuing with terminologies over here. Anytime we use the words that a person is exempt. What does it mean you're exempt? Well, exempt from what? You're exempt from chorus, which means a death by the hands of heaven. Also from, you're exempt from any death penalty or from bringing a sacrifice. However, you're exempt, but it's still prohibited to do this. You're not allowed to. It's an act that's a prohibition, right? But there's no consequence from it. In the Yisurim, and this prohibition is rabbinic. And this prohibition is in order that you should stay away. It should be like a fence around the biblical law. However, a person did this purposefully, intentionally, then the rabbis have the obligation to give lashes that is of a rabbinic nature. Likewise, wherever it says that you shouldn't do such and such, or it's prohibited to do such and such b'Shabbos, if you do such a thing willfully, purposefully, even though it's not a biblical law you're transgressing, it's rabbinic law, nonetheless, you do get stripes by the rabbis, meaning of a rabbinic nature. Halacha 4. Whenever the expression is used that it's permissible to do this, that means you're allowed to do that from the outset. It's perfectly okay to do. Likewise, whenever it says that you're under no obligation or pater miklum, and that you're completely exempt, means that a person doesn't receive any kind of punishment for this act. Halacha 5. Those things that are permissible that you can do on Shabbos. Now, you're allowed to do this particular act, but still, what might happen is that it's not absolutely for sure that this will happen, but it's possible that a forbidden labor will be performed as a result of what you're going to do. And what you wanted to do is the permissible thing and not the thing that it may lead to, only that it may lead to. So he gives example. Ketsa, what does this mean? Now, let's say you have a bed you want to move, a couch you want to move. Think back in the day, that homes, in your home, that there was a dirt floor. And by doing this, you're actually going to make a furrow in the ground, right? You're making a furrow in the ground, and that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. But you don't have any intent to make the furrow. Your intent is only to move the bed. It happens to be heavy and it's going to make the furrow. It doesn't matter, because your intent is not for the furrow. It's not to make the hole, right? Or to make the groove in the ground. Because you have no intent for that. Similarly, let's say a person is walking on the grass on Shabbos. Something Shabbos. And your intent is not, the grass is high, and by walking on the grass, you might be uprooting some of the grass, but that's not your intent. You're not interested in uprooting any grass. But you may, it's not 100% it's going to happen. It may happen. It doesn't matter, not a problem. You can walk on that grass. Another example, if if a person rubs some herbs over his hands on Shabbos, some herbs over his hands on Shabbos. 1 second. If so, a person is, I'm sorry. You're rubbing your hands on herbs or something else of that nature, right? And you don't want to remove any hair, but it may remove some hair. You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos if that your intent was to remove the hair. But if it accidentally does, you don't have to worry about it because it's not a problem. Also, if you happen to be in a narrow area, and you may be knocking part of a wall down because it's narrow and you can't get through, but your intent isn't to knock the wall down. Your intent is to try to get through. So since your intent is not to uproot the grass or to remove any hair from your skin or to remove anything of the wall, that's not your intent. Your intent is to do something else, and it's unlikely, or it's not for sure, it's certain that it will happen, then it is permissible. You don't have to worry about it. Now, let's take a different case. What if it's certain? In other words, you're doing one act, but it's certainly going to create an act that is not permissible. Oh, well, awesome. I said, so now halacha, number 6. In contrast, now, if you are doing one act that is permissible, but it's for sure going to, because your intent is that you would just want this thing, but not, the thing that's not permissible, but it's for sure going to happen, then you are liable. So what does this mean? So you have your child and you want to give your child excuse the example over here. It's going to sound a little crude, but it's Shabbos and your child is acting up, and you got a bunch of chickens around you, right? So you're going to give a chicken head. You want to give a toy to your child. They didn't have Mattel back then. They didn't have toys to give. So you're going to give now a toy. What are you going to do? So I want a toy. So I'm going to chop off the head of the chicken and give to my child the head to play with. Again, this is just an example, right? Don't go off with it. Right? Slaughtering it appropriately, of course, right? So since it's inevitable that you're going to kill the animal by doing it, and you're not allowed to kill the animal on Shabbos and produce blood, so since it's inevitable, therefore you're liable if you did such a thing, even though your intent was, I don't want to kill. I just want the head of the chicken so my child can play because the child is really, upset and needs a toy. So you have this is what's called psik reisha. This is a famous example that the Talmud uses of what it means that it's inevitable that you're doing this kind of act, that you are doing something that is not permissible, even though your intent is only to have a play toy for your child. Again, don't worry about the example, just to bring out a point. Otherwise, as opposed to when you're walking in the grass, it's not inevitable that you're going to kick up some, uproot some grass, which you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Halacha 7. Now, a person who's performing a forbidden act on Shabbos, right? Even though they don't need for the particular thing, they're still liable. Okay, so what does this mean? What's an example? Hooray. So you put out a candle, but you didn't want to put out the candle. You're not allowed to put out a candle on Shabbos, right? That is an activity, labor you're not allowed to do. But my intent, and that's what's important over here. The point is, what's my intent? My intent was that I needed the oil. So I put out the candle. I want the oil. Now you might say we're playing with things over here. No, it's very important that we're talking. Everything has to have has to be a deliberate action, has to be a purposeful action, has to be a creative action, has to be intended action, in order that we are liable for the malacha, for that action that we did on Shabbos, right? So over here, it's a purposeful act. It's deliberate that I'm putting out the candle. It's creative in the sense that I put something out, but it's not intended, right? So kadei shelo yovad boy, kadei shelo yisrael, or kadei shelo yibake cherish is an ermi pnei shakiboy malacha, or in iskabel lechabes, afal bishe eno tzarech leguf hakiboy, v'kol kiboy ela mipnei hashemen, or mipnei cherish, or mipnei psila, harei zechai. So even though since the act is an act that's not allowed, but you don't have the intent in that particular act to do that particular thing, but the act is not allowed, therefore you are still liable in that case of where you wanted the oil and all you're doing is putting out the candle, but not because, or putting out the flame, not because you want to put out a flame. Your intent is not in that. I just need the oil there, right? I need to put that in my salad, for example, right? Likewise, if I move a thorn 4 cubits, which is about 6 feet in the public domain, or if a person extinguishes a coal so that many people shouldn't become injured by the coal that's in the public domain, even though my intent was not to put out the coal, my intent was not to move the thorn. Like it wasn't the movement of the thorn. I just wanted to put that thorn that could hurt somebody in the position it was in the side of the sort of the side of the public domain where no one's going to step on it and hurt themselves. So I didn't have the intent, but since the act is prohibited, you are liable. I don't need the particular act, but since in that particular intention of the act of putting out or moving something, it's not that I wanted to move it, and therefore I'm not allowed to move something in the public domain more than 6 feet, 4 cubits. But I just didn't want it to be dangerous. But since the act is something that's prohibited, it doesn't matter that your intent was for something else. Halacha 8. Anybody who has an intention to do an act of an asa, now what happens if you wanted to do a particular act, right? You're not allowed to do it, but you ended up doing something else, like whatever, your hand went the other way. You didn't intend that. So it's pater. Pater means that you don't that you have no punishment, but you're not allowed to do it. It's still usher. It's still prohibited. Why? Because it's not deliberate. Here's the idea of being deliberate. Ketza, what's the example? Let's say I wanted to throw a stone or an arrow at my friend, a behemoth or an animal. Yeah, I got upset with my friend and I wanted to kill him. I wanted to. Someone wanted to. Right? These are just examples to bring out a point. So let's not get carried away with them and feel like whatever. By the way, if we can see people's faces, that would be amazing. can have everybody join us in that way. Wow. So what happened? You missed the mark. And what you did though was you uprooted from the tree, right? And you're not allowed to uproot anything from the tree, right? Something of the tree, whether a branch, leaf, or something like that. So you are potter. Potter means that you're free of any liability. Of course, though, it is prohibited. I mean, obviously, it's prohibited to kill a person. We're talking not about a person. Oh, how could someone to kill somebody? This has got nothing to do with ethics over here. These are the laws of Shabbos and what is called a transgression of Shabbos in the area that you are liable, not liable, things that are actually permitted, right? And as we're giving all the different examples here, okay? So this is how much more does this principle apply if one had intent in performing a lesser transgression, right? Then one who performed a lesser transgression, and one who performed a more serious one. So, for example, let's give an example. In other words, the intent. For example, so you wanted to throw something into what's called a Carmelis, which is only a rabbinic law of movement in that area. It's a rabbinic law. But what happened? You actually moved the thing, the stone, right, into the public domain. Shuhu Pater. So then in that instance, for sure, you are not liable because it's only from a rabbinic to a biblical. What the intent was only to do a rabbinic transgression. In the end, you did a biblical transgression. But since you didn't do what you intended to do, right? The idea here is the intent, the deliberately, this is what I wanted to do, and I end up doing something else. Then you are for sure in such an instance, that's called the kal v'chemer, all the more so that you are not liable. And also all similar instances. Let's say you had intent to do a permissible thing, but you did something else. Like you wanted to cut something that's already cut from the ground, right? Does it give an example? So, something that's a mechuber in a chayiv klum. So you wanted to cut off. You're next to the tree. You're next to the tree, and you wanted to cut the apple, right? And by accident, you cut the apple. Not that it was already cut from the tree. That fell from the tree. You wanted to cut it, and accidentally, you went like this, and you cut the apple that was from the tree, right? Which you're not allowed to do. But since what you wanted to do was something permissible, so therefore you're not obliged because you didn't do purposefully that act. Your act was for something else. Deliberately, it was a different thing you wanted to do, and therefore you are not obliged, not liable. And all similar things. Halacha 9. So now, giving another example, right here we're talking about all the ideas of what are you being deliberate about. What is your intent that you want to do? And somehow you did something different than what you wanted to do. Are you liable? Not liable. So now your intent was that you wanted to pick some black figs, right? But instead, what did you pick? White figs. Or another example, that you wanted to first pick figs, and then you wanted to pick afterwards, you wanted to pick grapes. And what happened? You did it the opposite way, right? You first picked up the grapes, and then you picked up the figs. So you didn't do deliberately in the intended idea that you wanted to do. We got to let in over here. Thank you. You didn't do particularly what you wanted to do, right? You did it the opposite way. So you might say, well, what's the difference? I did the opposite way. Well, it's not deliberate. So it's not the deliberate action that I wanted to do. So therefore you are pater. You're not liable. You're not allowed to do it. It's not a question of you're allowed. We're talking here about, is there any kind of, do you have to bring a sacrifice? Do you have to bring, do you get chorus and all these things becomes the issue. Since you didn't do it in the order that you wanted to, you did it in the opposite way, right? So you didn't do it exactly. So it wasn't deliberate action that you wanted to do. So therefore, you are not liable. Again, you're not allowed to do it, but you're not liable for any kind of punishment. But like Havana, also, you did it without the intended deliberate action that you wanted to do. Because the Torah only forbids purposeful, intended, deliberate actions of labor. Halacha Yud 10. Wait, I'm sorry, I didn't. I'm doing it from my book, and I have to continuously roll over here. Okay. Halacha number 9. Number 10. There were 2 other candles that were lit before you, burning or extinguished, right? Your intent was to put this one out, and you put the other one out, right? 2 candles in front of you. And this one I wanted to put out, but accidentally I put out the one on the left, not the one on the right, right? Chayiv. For that, you're actually obliged. Why? Because you did the actual action that you wanted to do. You wanted to put out a candle, and you put out the candle, or you wanted to light a candle. You put on a candle. It was the one on the left, not the one on the right that you had intended, but the act was the act that you purposeful intended act that you wanted to do. Therefore, you are liable. What is it similar to? Your intent was that you wanted another similar instance of this, is that you wanted to pick this fig, and you took another fig, right? Or you wanted to kill this person, but you killed another person. In the end, you're liable. Why? Because the act that you did is the act that you wanted to do. Right? You wanted to do an action of killing. You wanted to do an action of picking a fig. Oh, so was this fig, that fig? You wanted the act of lighting the candle. Doesn't matter. You are liable. Halacha 11. However, this is getting complicated, and I hope you're following the logic and all of this, because it's very logical, all of this, these ideas. So he's saying over here in the 11th halacha that if you don't have a liability in the following case, that where 2 candles were before a person, one lit and one extinguished, and the person intended to kindle the one that was extinguished first, and then to extinguish the second candle afterwards. But what did you do? You reverse the order. In other words, you extinguished the candle first and you kindled the second candle afterwards. To admit people, thanks. And you did it the opposite way, right? So in the end, both things got done, but you didn't do the deliberate intended action that you wanted. So therefore, you are not liable. Sorry. But if you did both lighting and putting out in the same action, then you would be obliged. Even though you did one before the other, but it was the same action, so then you would be obliged, you'd be liable. because one didn't come after the other. It wasn't two different actions, it was one action. Being that they all came together, therefore you would be liable. All similar things. So whenever a person performs a forbidden labor casually, without specific intention, then the person exempt from punishment. You're exempt, but it's still forbidden to do, right? Halacha, oops, I'm sorry, 12. I need someone else to help me because I'm reading from my book over here. Now, what if your intent was to do an action, to perform something forbidden, but you actually did something more than you originally intended? Nonetheless, you're liable. Now there's more of that action, more of it. So you did, because we're talking about intent. So what does intent mean? I did more than I expected. So, okay, so what's the example? So you intended to take out a burden. You're holding on to a package, right? And you were carrying it, and you were holding it in the back of you, and then you brought it in front of you, which is more of an action of carrying than on your back, because it's in your hands, not on your back, right? So it's more the action of carrying. You are still liable, even though I was planning to do it on my back, and now it came to my front, so I shouldn't be liable. No, you're liable because it's more, it's not less. Because it's more guarded, the bundle in front of you than it is from behind you, so therefore it's even more of an act of carrying. But what if your intent was, I was going to carry in front of me, but somehow it got scooped to the back of me? Then you are not liable, because what happened was I was going to protect it more, but I end up doing less. So in that instance, I would not be liable because it is less, not more. Halacha 13. If a person now transfers the article that he's going. Remember, this walking out in the public domain, which you're not allowed to carry anything. So now taking this article in the public domain to another person is liable in this situation. You're wearing a belt and you place the burden that is commonly transferred in this manner between his body and the garment. So whether the burden is hung in front of him or shifted behind him at the time when he transferred it, the person's still liable, since it is likely to shift position. Now, when you're carrying a package on your back is more, sort of emphatic, or carrying in the front. But a belt can shift from front to back, so it doesn't make a difference, and therefore you would be liable in either case, even though it shifted and you didn't follow the intent that you initially had. All right, halacha 14. This is about the minimum of what needs to be met in the laws of a transgression on Shabbos. So whenever a person had an intent, to desire to perform a forbidden act on Shabbos, and they began to perform it, and they did the certain amount that was necessary to incur the liability, the person's liable, even though they didn't complete the desired task. They didn't do it fully. What's an example of this? You had an intent, you wanted to write a whole letter to your friend. Shabbos, not allowed to write a letter, right? Or Shabbos, or a legal document on Shabbos. So you might think, well, since the intent of the person was to write a complete document, and they didn't write the complete document, right? So therefore they shouldn't be liable until they finished the complete intention. However, since the law is, after writing 2 letters, you are liable. So it doesn't matter what your intent was, because in writing half a document, you have two letters. So in those two letters, right away, you are liable. Similarly, let's say you wanted to sew on Shabbos, you wanted to make yourself a garment, right? And you wanted to do the whole thing. Remember, it has to be purposeful, intended, deliberate action, labor that is what you're liable for. But I wanted to do the entire garment, but I only did half the garment. Doesn't matter, because after two stitches, by the law, you are liable, and the two stitches is included in the half that you did. Since what you did with your intent was enough to be liable, you're liable. It was in all similar instances. Halacha 15. That was all about intent that we learned. Now we're going to learn not about intent, but we're going to learn about the action that you're doing. What if you can't do it all on your own and you need a partner to do it, to do the forbidden action on Shabbos? So two people, they're doing the same, they're doing a forbidden act together, right? But one of them could have performed it by himself, right? Then they're both free of the liability because they did it together. That means they're free from the liability. It's still not permitted, but they don't get any kind of punishment. So this applies whether the one performed part of the forbidden labor and the other performed the remainder of it, like they shared the act. In other words, one person, he removed the article from one domain, and then he placed it down in and the other person, he handed it to the other person. The other person put it down in the other domain, because to be liable, you have to, for moving something from one domain to another domain, you have to have the pickup and the setting of it down to be liable. But what if two people shared in that? So therefore, in such an instance, since each one could have done it themselves and they only did half of the act, therefore they're not liable because they didn't do it from beginning to end. Same thing if both held the pen and wrote, or both held a loaf of bread and transferred it from one domain to another domain, right? So two people holding on, one person could have done it, right? Writing. But since the two did it together, so therefore they're not liable for that transgression, meaning they don't get kares or skila or achatais, but it is again prohibited. Halacha 16. Im ein echad mehem yochel la'aseh levadei ad sheyisafek kekoin shnayim ad she'achzu ke'er v'yisiyah levishas rabbim hoyel ve'en koyachad echad ein la'aseh levadei also yisab b'shutfos v'tri levad seif shnayim chayavim k'shir echad l'shnayim. Now we're going to take it to the other side of it. What happens if you got a big beam and one person isn't strong enough to bring out that beam outside? Two people do pick it up together and they're able to take it outside. They're both liable because each one couldn't do it on their own. If each one could do it on their own and they did it together, then they're not liable. But since it was too big and too heavy, since they were able to do it together and they were only able to do it together, so then it's considered like one act, and therefore they're both liable. Now, what happens if it was a log and one guy is strong enough to take it out on his own? The other guy isn't strong enough to take it on his own, but they did it together. So the first guy who was strong enough to take it out on his own, he is liable because he could have done it on his own. The other guy who was only the helper, since he couldn't do it on his own, so therefore he doesn't have the capacity to do it, so therefore he's not liable. I hope you're following this logic. Halacha 17. Now we go into another area. What happens? I'm destructive, right? So in other words, we're till now we're talking about intent of we're talking about doing something that was purposeful, deliberate, intended. Now we go into there's another thing that that you need, and that's creative. If it's not creative, then you're not liable. That a labor means a creative act. So if you now do something destructive, Ketsa, for example, you hurt your friend, right? You injured him, right? Or an animal in a way to be destructive. You ripped your clothes, or you burnt them. Or you threw down the dishes because you're really angry. You're putter. You're not liable. Again, you're not allowed to do it, but you're not liable. Why? Because it wasn't creative. It was destructive. So likewise, if you dug a hole and you did it only because you needed the sand. So since you are being destructive in the act, right? You didn't do it purposefully because you want the hole, so therefore you're not liable. Even though you did an act over here, because your intent was of a destructive nature, therefore you're not obliged. Halacha 18, 2 more to go. However, if you do something destructive in order to fix, then you're obliged. Then you're liable. For example, let's say you knock down a building in order to build a nicer, bigger building, or just whatever, another building. So therefore, it's destruction in order to fix. So you're really fixing, you're not destroying, therefore you would be liable. Or you erase something, right? You erase something in order that you should write there. So it's a destruction in erasing, but you did it in order that you can write something there, so therefore it is creative. You say this, or you dug a hole, but you did it for the intent for you want to put foundations there. So therefore, even though digging is like, destructive in a sense, that you're making a hole, but since it's for a purpose of being creative, of putting foundation there, you are liable. So all similar things. Last halacha 19. For the first chapter in the laws of Shabbos. Now, what happens if you started off doing something, a forbidden act on Shabbos, and you only did it partly unintentionally, but partly purposefully, like, you got in the middle, you did it unintentionally, but then you started doing it willfully, intentionally to something, or you did it. You started off intentionally, but then then you kind of lost your focus and you did it unintentionally, right? You are not liable. Why? Because you have to do a complete act, right? So a complete act of writing is only 2 letters, right? So, or for example, right, it has to be from beginning to end that you did it willfully. Right, and then you become from that moment to the whole act was done of what the engagement of that act was, like 2 letters, even though you write the whole letter. Like after that, you did it and you forgot that it was Shabbos. First 2 letters you remember it was Shabbos, and then somehow you went daydreaming and you forgot, and you didn't do it intentionally that it was Shabbos, right? But since you did 2 letters, that's the beginning to the end, then you would be liable. But if it was less than that, then you wouldn't be liable. So therefore, in that instance, you would have excision from the hands of heaven, or if there were witnesses and hasra and warning, then you could get the death sentence. Or if it was done unintentionally, then you could be obliged in unintentionally in, oh boy, let's see all the notes over here, a sin offering. Whew. Oh my gosh. This is going to be a long road. I'm sorry it took so long. Next chapter, my dear son Yosef.
All right. We're going to do chapter number 2 of the laws of Shabbat. Number 1, the laws of Shabbat are suspended when it comes to danger of life. Therefore, someone that's sick and is in danger, you do whatever the doctor says in order to help him. What if you're in doubt if he's in that predicament or not, or he or she? And likewise, if one doctor says that it is in that predicament of a danger, and another doctor says no, that person is not in that situation, so you're in a doubt. So in those cases, you still, the laws of Shabbat are still suspended for that situation. Number two, now, what if they decided that for 8 days a person needs to do something specific? By doing that something specific, it's going to go against the laws of Shabbat. So you may think to yourself, it's 8 days, so why don't I wait till Sunday? This way, I'll only be being desecrate one Shabbat. So we say, no. You do it right away, even if it means that you're going 8 days means that you're going to be desecrating two Shabbosim, and you can even desecrate up to 100 Shabbosim, as long as this is something that it's on behalf of saving someone is in danger. And you're allowed to light a candle, and you're allowed to extinguish a candle, you're allowed to slaughter, you're allowed to cook, you're allowed to bake, you're allowed to bring hot water, whether it's to drink, whether it's for a bath. Understand this general rule. When it comes to someone that's in danger, is life-threatening situation, then Shabbos is like a weekday. You do whatever is necessary for them. Number three, now, when it comes to this, so you could say, you know what? I know these things need to be done for this person that's in a life-threatening situation, but I want to ask a child or a woman or maybe somebody else, So we say, no, absolutely not. Don't ask any of these people, because then what you're showing is that Shabbat is not as important for them. Have the greatest Jews, they should be the ones do it. You don't delay. When it comes to someone that's in a dangerous situation, life-threatening situation, don't delay. Do it right away, because it says in the Torah that you should do the Torah and live with them, and not that you should die with them. Which meaning the idea of Torah, you shouldn't keep Torah. You should keep Torah in order to live with it. That it should enhance your life. If you have a life-threatening situation, so then you desecrate Shabbat for that. What we learn from this verse is that the laws of Torah is not to bring vengeance to the world. On the contrary, it's mercy, kindness, and peace to the world. And to those non-believers that say doing such treatment is a violation in Shabbat, you can apply the verse that says in Yecheskel, as punishment, I gave them harmful laws and judgment through which they cannot live. Meaning it was a self judgment on that they did them to themselves. God Almighty made them think that way, but that's not the truth. That's not Torah. Number four, he's going into details now. What would constitute a life-threatening situation? So referring to the eyes, when someone has something coming out of the eyes, or tears are flowing out of the eyes, or blood flows from the eyes, or when they have fever, any of these type of things is considered a life-threatening situation, and you do whatever you need to do. Number five, similarly, if someone has a wound on his body, on his lips or inwards, or it's in his mouth, or any of his organs, his liver or his spleen. So if you have any type of wound on these, this is considered a life-threatening situation. You don't need to go to a doctor and check it out. You right away do whatever you need to in order to help yourself. If one has a wound on the back of his hand or on the back of his foot, it's considered having a wound on an organ that's inside of your body, and you don't need to be evaluated. And likewise, if someone has fever that causes the flesh, you see it on the flesh, that is considered a wound that you desecrate the Shabbos. Any type of wound that a doctor will say that there is danger here, even though it's on the outside of the skin, you listen to the doctors and you desecrate Shabbos. The laws of Shabbat are suspended in that situation. Number 6, so a person swallow a leech, so the way that they would heal them is they would heat water, and they would use it. That was the medical treatment. So you're allowed to do that on Shabbos since it's a life-threatening situation. If a dog bit him, a wild dog, and any of the poisonous snakes or other reptiles, even if you're in doubt if it was considered a snake that kills, that is poisonous, you should do whatever you need to in order to heal yourself, to make sure that you don't get harmed. Number 7, if a physician assessed that this sick person needed a fig, 10 people ran to bring him a fig. So now he has 10 figs, but only needed 1. All of them are non-liable for desecrating the Shabbat. Even if they bring it one after the other, not at the same time, and even if he became healed by eating the first one, since they all did it in order to save this person's life for Shabbat, then they are not liable. Number 8, if now here you have a question that the doctor said that he needs 2 figs, but so there was one branch that had 3 figs on it, or there was single figs on single branches. So if you take 2 figs from single branches, you'll be ripping off 2 branches, or if you just rip off 1 branch, but you'll have an extra fig that was not necessary. So the law is rather take the one that has 3 figs, because then you're only ripping off 1 stem, or desecrating Shabbat once, even though you're going to have an extra fig, and likewise any situation like that. Number 9, if you cook for a sick person and there's leftovers, a healthy person is not allowed to eat from that on that Shabbat, because we're afraid that you're going to cook extra in order for everyone to enjoy. However, if an animal is slaughtered for a sick person and there's extra, there you are allowed to eat, because there's no way of making that extra. You're slaughtering one animal. Therefore, you're allowed to eat that. Number 10. Now, what if it was a sick person that's not in a life-threatening situation? Then a Gentile, a non-Jew, is allowed to do things for them. You tell the Gentile in order to cook for the person, to bake for the person, to bring something from one place to the other, bring him medication or whatever he needs. A person can get eye treatment from a Gentile if it's not a life-threatening situation. But and if it's something that is not considered doing something that desecrates Shabbos, then even a Jew is allowed to do it. therefore a person may lift the tendons of the ear. Oh, myelin unkali umasines a person is allowed to lift the cartilage around the heart, restore broken bones to their places. These things that, because it's not considered activities that are forbidden on Shabbat, you're allowed to do. A Jew is allowed to do that. Number 11. A woman that is in the process of childbirth, that is considered a life-threatening situation, and you're allowed to do whatever is necessary for on Shabbat. You're allowed to bring a midwife from place to place, and you're allowed to cut the umbilical cord. If she requires to light a candle while she's in labor pains, then you light the candle. Even if she's blind, because it does help a woman that's in labor to be more relaxed with a candle, even if she doesn't see it. If she needs oil, you bring it. If it's possible to be brought in an uncharacteristic manner, or a friend brings a utensil in her hair, or you bring it in your left hand instead of your right hand, then do it. But if not, really do not stress over that. Number 12. You shouldn't help someone that serves idols. You shouldn't help them on Shabbat. But if it's someone that's not an idol worship, even though they're not Jewish, you are allowed to help them, and you should help them because we are commanded to help. But we may not, however, violate the Shabbat laws on her behalf. But you should help in any way you can. Number 13. A woman on childbirth, once she starts with the blood starts flowing, from that moment on until 3 days after she gives birth, we desecrate Shabbat for what she needs. Whether she said I need it or not. From the 3rd day of childbirth until the 7th day, if she says I don't need it, then we listen to her and we don't desecrate the Shabbat for it. If she was quiet, or of course, if she said she needs it, then we do desecrate the Shabbat. From the 7th day, from the 7th day until the 30th day, she's considered like a regular sick person that needs help, and therefore it's better to do it through a non-Jew. Number 14. A woman, after she gives birth, even in the summer, we light up a fire in front of her because they're extra cold and they need the heat. But we do not light a fire for other sick people to warm themselves. If a person was draw blood, had a lot of draw blood and be and what?
Bloodletting,
and is cold, then we do light a fire for them on Shabbos. And you do, after cutting the umbilical cord of the child, you may wash the newborn, whether it's water that was prepared before Shabbat or water prepared on Shabbat. And you put on herbal powder on the skin and on the limbs. Because it's a danger for the baby if this is not done right away. Likewise, you can bathe the baby. You bathe the baby before it gets circumcised and after it has the bris, and the 3rd day of the bris, even hot water that was warmed up on Shabbat, because the baby is in danger. Number 15. A woman that was in labor and unfortunately died in labor. So she died in labor. So now you should do a C-section. You should bring a knife on Shabbat, whatever it takes to do a C-section on the baby, because it's very possible that the child is actually still alive there. Therefore, even if we are in doubt, we do it in order to save the baby. Number 16. All activities necessary to save a life should be performed on Shabbat, and you don't need to go ask permission. And the person that does it, that runs to do it, is more zealous about it, is more praised. Ketzan. What's the example? If you see a child drowning in the water, you take a fishing net and you go grab the child out, even if you're going to also catch some fish, which is not allowed on Shabbat. You heard a child that was drowned in the water, and you took a fishing net and you went and you tried to sift the child out of the water, and fish came in, but no child. You're still potter. It's not considered, you're not held liable. Now, even on the other hand, if you decided that you're going fishing, you're not even trying to save the baby, and you went fishing and you picked up a fish and a child, now you're also not liable because you saved a child's life, even if it wasn't intentional. Number 17. If a child fell in a pit, a person, you're allowed to put down, you're allowed to open up, you're allowed to make a pit into the earth in order to pick him up, even though you're making a step by digging out a step there. If a child got locked behind a locked door, if a child's locked behind the door, you're allowed to break down the door, even though he chops the wood into pieces, and now you can use the pieces for specific things. Nevertheless, you have to do it because the child may become frightened behind the locked door and die. If there's a fire broke out and somebody's in there and you're afraid that the fire will harm them, you're allowed to extinguish the fire on Shabbat. And whoever is more zealous about it and does it quicker is praiseworthy, and he does not need to ask permission in those situations. Number 18. If an avalanche has fallen and you have a doubt if there is a human being in there or not, you're allowed to open it up on Shabbos to check. And what if you open it up and you see, unfortunately, the person that's in there is crushed and you don't think they have a long time to survive? Nevertheless, you still do everything that you can to take that person out, even if he only survives for another hour, he or she. Number 19. If you're clearing the debris and you reach the person's nose and unfortunately the person is not alive anymore, then you just leave them. Now, what if you were taking off the debris and you see that the person on the top is dead, unfortunately? You don't say, if the person on top is dead, most probably everybody's on there. No. You move away that person because maybe somebody all the way on the bottom is still alive and you can still save them, and you do this all on Shabbat. Number 20. Let's say you're in a place, in a building that collapsed, and there's even if there's thousands of Gentiles and only one Jew, you still do everything that you would do because maybe you can save that Jew. Even if one person went from this place to the next place and it fell in the second place, it's possible that person that went from the first place A to place B was the Jew, and therefore you have to also take out the debris in the second place as well. Number 21. Now, what if everybody went from place A to place B, and then while they were going from place A to place B, one person went to place C? You don't need to take off and we don't know who went there to place C. You don't have to take off the debris of somebody that fell in place C. Why? Because the rule is like this: when you're going from when you're leaving a place, then you go after the majority. If you're still in the original place, we don't go after the majority. Even if there's one Jew, we do whatever we have to. Once you leave a place, then the rule of majority is in place. Now, if it's majority Jews, so then you would assume that the person that left the place C is also is a Jew. But if the majority is not Jewish, then you go according to majority and you don't take off the debris from place number C. Number 22. If you're in the desert and you don't have a calendar and you don't have a WhatsApp, you don't have a smartphone, and you don't know when it's Shabbat, so you count 6 days. On the 7th day, you declare Shabbat, you make Kiddush and you make Havdalah and you do whatever you need to do on Shabbat. Why are you shocked? Because you don't know what Shabbat, or you're shocked that somebody could live a life without a smartphone? Even on and every other day besides the Shabbat, meaning the 6th day of the week. Now the thing is, it may be Shabbat. So therefore, what are you going to do? Keep every day Shabbat. So he says every single day you should work for whatever you need in order to live, but don't do extra. If you know for a fact that you left on Tuesday. Now, 8 days later, it's 8 days later, then you know for a fact that it's not Shabbat because there's no way you left on Shabbat. Right? You don't know. So this is the thing. You don't know what day. Sorry, it wasn't Tuesday. You have no idea when you left, right? Because we don't know when it's Shabbat. 8 days later from when you left is for sure not Shabbat, because you for sure didn't go on Shabbat. You went Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but not Shabbat. So that 8th day, and likewise the 8th day after that, and the 8th day after that, then you could work all day without having any question. But any other day could be that you left on Friday, could be left on Sunday, could be Shabbat. You have no idea. So therefore, the only day that you can work all day without making measurements is the 8th day or the 8th day after that. Number 23. If Gentiles put a siege on the Jewish city, if they came just for money, so then you don't desecrate Shabbat. But if it was a city located near the border, even if they just come for some hay, then you have to fight them. Why? Because once they break the border, then they're in. Meaning, if you're holding the border of them coming in to destroy the Jewish cities. And in any situation, if they came, if life was a threatening situation, meaning if they came to kill Chas v'Shalom, then you wage full war on Shabbat, because to save a life. And all, even if you don't live in that town, any Jew from all the surrounding towns could come and help those Jews that need help, and it would be considered not a desecration of Shabbat for them. And it's forbidden to wait till Motzei Shabbos. You say, you know what, I'm so many miles away, might as well wait till after Shabbos, then go help. No, you got to go right away. And then when you go help you go help them, and let's say you win the war and it's the Shabbos morning, somebody invited you for some challah, you don't have to wait till Shabbos is over to go back home. You can go back home right away. Why? Because we're going to make you wait till Shabbat is over. The next time you'll hesitate to go. But if we let you go back home right away, then there'll be no hesitation. Number 24. Similarly, if a ship is sinking in the sea or a city is surrounded by flooding rivers, it is a mitzvah to go out and help in any way you can in order to save those people in those cities. Even if it's one person being pursued by someone that's a Gentile is trying to kill him, or by a snake, or by a bear, you do whatever you can in order to save that person. Even if it means that you have to do many different melachot that are several forbidden labors that are on Shabbat, even if it means that you have to sharpen your sword, whatever it is, you're allowed to do it. Similarly, we should cry out to Hashem on their behalf, daven, and do whatever, and summon people to help to help for Shabbat. But we do not cry out to Hashem to help if it's a plague. If it's a plague, then we don't cry out on Shabbat. Sarin al ayore sa'id mazal shlish yom Shabbos. If the other way around, if you're going to fight a non-Jewish city, a non-Jewish town, you should lay siege 3 days before Shabbat. Then once you lay siege and you're waging war against them, then you could fight every single day, even on Shabbat, until you conquer it, even though it is a voluntary war, meaning it's not something that the war itself is not a mitzvah. It says in the Torah, until you have subjugated it, which means that you can do it even on Shabbat. Of course, this rule does not apply with regard to a war, which is a mitzvah. Looking back in history, Joshua conquered Jericho on Shabbat. Why? Because the war itself was a mitzvah. And with this, we conclude chapter number 2 of Shabbat. We don't hear you. We don't hear you. We don't hear you.
Wow, amazing. Thank you, Yosef. Amazing. A lot of information, a lot of things to digest. I hope we're able to digest all the things that we learned. It's going to be a struggle here henceforward, but we will make it happen. So tomorrow we continue. We're going to start really on time, so make sure you're here on time so we can make sure we get through the stuff. And a lot of amazing details and a lot of nuances. It's beautiful. See you tomorrow, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the commitment.
You all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, rabbis.
Thank you.
Rabbi Spine.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.